and then we'll have our Q&A, so answering your dark data queries at the end. That'll be throughout all of our speakers. You can either hold your questions till then or drop them in the chat, as I said earlier. And then at the end, we'll have an optional demo for the last 15 minutes. So hold on till then.
Hello, everyone. So just going to talk you through who's going to be speaking on this webcast. So there's myself, Michelle Hurd. So I'm an external account manager at Risual. We've also got Richard, one of the consultants at Risual. And then we have Paul, who is a principal solution strategist at Automated Intelligence. So I'm just going to kick off by talking through who are Risual. So we are UK based. We're globally recognised market leader in consulting, managed services and solutions in IT. We do consider ourselves to be your go-to experts in transformation, and we've recently revamped our portfolio to reflect this. So here you can see on the slides that we cover cloud, digital and business transformation. As a business, we are genuinely passionate about transforming organisations, and we have the embedded values of honesty, openness and trust. And we do truly take pride in delivering innovative Microsoft technologies to all of our clients. So this leads me on to the next slide. So here you can see sort of like a basic overview of our business, and the majority of what we cover is on here. So I'm just going to touch on it briefly for you. So as I mentioned, we've got the three main pillars of our business. So I'll start with cloud transformation. So within cloud transformation, we can help you with data center transformation. If you want to look at a more modern workplace, IT service transformation, we can look at your multi-cloud delivery, and we also cover service optimization within that. So Risual's cloud transformation portfolio really does help our clients accelerate their journeys to the cloud. We are very proud to have recently achieved Azure Expert MSP certification, and this puts Risual in the top 0.02% of all Microsoft partners globally that meets the standards of Azure Expert MSP, and this truly does help make Risual your experts in cloud transformation. One of the other pillars of our business is business transformation. So within our business transformation side of the business, we can help you with your business applications, have a look into process automation, help you with digital skills, and truly help with employee-driven services. Our business transformation portfolio combines modern technology with strong people change management approaches, and this really does help re-engineer how your business can operate. And closely linked to the business transformation side of the business, we have our digital transformation side. Within this, we can help you increase insight and outcomes. We can look into redefining your services. We can help you enhance your customer engagement and just help basically create better revenue and growth within your organisation. Our digital transformation portfolio really does unleash the power of innovation. We focus on the needs of the users, and then we'll look at designing and delivering new ways to engage with your customers. And this can be across multiple channels. So we do help our clients create their digital vision. So we can help you at each stage of your transformation, whether it's in the assessment and strategy phase, the planning and implementation phase, or even the optimization and support. So I'm now going to hand you over to Paul.
Thank you very much for that, Michelle. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit here is dark data, obviously. Now, look, the universe, it's made up of a material that scientists cannot directly observe because it does not emit light or energy. They refer to it as dark matter, and it's estimated this takes up to 80% of the mass of the universe. So it's an apt description for the presence of a large portion of data out there today, dark data. Perhaps by bizarre coincidence or some unknown correlation we've yet to discover, dark data is estimated to be approximately, yes, you guessed it, about 80% of the data that's out there. So that's what we're talking about today, dark data. This quote showing up here from Gartner helps bring focus on what we mean by dark data. It's the data that organizations are collecting, processing, storing. It's all part of the regular business activities, but businesses are generally failing to use it for other purposes. We know today that business depends on data, increasingly so, to the point that it's hard to conceive of a business that can grow and be successful without it. Recent times, we've come to understand the concept that big data refers to the entire data in an organization. It is big because it is being generated in ever-increasing ways, at an ever-increasing rate because of the new technologies. So many organizations are struggling to get it under control. We can see that. And essentially, they are being overwhelmed by the sheer deluge of data. So knowing that they have business critical data for organizations is essential, and they feel comfortable they know where it is generally and how to protect it. I mean, this is the data that ensures a business can operate. It powers the business. It justifies the financial costs to maintain the integrity, the accuracy, the reliability. Essentially, that critical data is the tip of the iceberg. And underneath that is the dark data. I feel like we need some ghostly wailing at this point, seeing as we've just been past Halloween. But the vast amount of this data is hidden from view. It contains value, is indisputable. But unfortunately, the value is largely unknown, and it's different in every industry. So if you just consider for a minute how data is produced by different departments day by day, scattered through all levels and all areas of the business for different purposes, once it's served its purpose, it is often forgotten, out of mind, and yet its presence grows, and it probably only becomes a noticeable burden for IT when space runs out somewhere along the chain, or systems strain under the weight of the unseen mass, and you can't search, you can't save, you can't find. And that's typically when it surfaces and people realize just how big the problem is. But look, dark data, it's made up of a lot of different things. It could be multiple old versions of documents. And if you think about that, it's like a history. It's showing the decisions made as business processes unfurl. You've email attachments that have been downloaded, disconnected from the origin, from the original email, and has no context, and it's just left forgotten. Project data at the end of life, slipping from view and consideration, or even employee data and files that just languish somewhere in a dark corner, kept just in case, often long after the people have moved on. There are also the obvious log files and reports, the general transactions and history of so much activity that has helped organizations to grow. Sometimes because of poor data management, poor decisions have been made which have impacted growth. But it's all there, the narrative of your business. At the time, these files served a purpose, and then the creators and consumers, they moved on to the next day, the next role, the next decision, if you like. So if you consider spreadsheets that have been intrinsic to many operational activities in every organization, the power of a spreadsheet in the right hands to yield great insights. And I'll confess, I'm not a powerful Excel user, but I've seen some pretty amazing solutions out there. And it's testament to the creativity and versatility of people just trying to get their job done. And there's so much of it out there. So the rise of new technologies has seen new solutions and methods emerge for creation and consumption of data. Organizations try to move from one technology to the next, and this leaves in its wake these legacy systems. And although they're legacy because the technology's been superseded, but quite often they are still in use, and they are still a critical element to the business. But simply they're left in the dark, they're lacking control, insight, or true value. I don't know how many times I've heard people in the past. Now, I've quite a long history in working in IT from a lot of different levels. And it's not always in true jest when someone suggests pulling the plug on an old device or server somewhere and wait for the screams. Again, let's cue the sound effects for Halloween. But it is genuine. People have services out there that they're not actually sure who's using them and the value they bring. And the problem is expanding. Entropy and sprawl in data is a real challenge. Organizations are storing data in low structured distributed systems, often in open source databases and unmanaged devices. It's not necessarily deliberate or planned. Where once organizations rolled out a new application perhaps once a year, this has accelerated to the point where new applications of some description are being dropped into the information landscape on a weekly, in some cases, and even a daily basis for some organizations. Why? Look, businesses need to evolve. They need to be proactive and efficient in responding to the ever-changing and very competitive market out there. And it's increasingly being recognized that data-driven insights is the key. Most of you will probably have heard of data democratization, the idea that data should not be the preserve of IT. The business needs to have access. The business needs to be able to use it. And essentially, business needs to use it to make decisions and effectively do day-to-day business and improve how the business is running. But the problem is often that data governance has not kept pace, and we've left too many dark places out there. And so, more than ever before, every business should have a data strategy. If not already in place, it should be top of the to-do list, even as a minimal viable strategy to begin with. For many, it isn't happening. In short, the data strategy needs to outline the data your business needs to be successful, to grow and be competitive. Part of that is governance, which helps bring data under control and within regulation. So the next slide leads me to talk about what the risks are within dark data. So why worry now? The reality is twofold: value and risk. If you don't extract the value from the data you have, then you're at risk of being outpaced by your competitors in the market, or are likely to fail to deliver on high expectations of your customers. They see the improved customer experience delivered by the data-driven organizations out there. They want more, they want it faster, and they want it easier. Whatever it is, the customer relationship is defined by their experience, and it's what counts if your business is to thrive. We're all customers today, and we all have experience of the benefits those organizations that bring innovation and improved levels of service can give us. So the value of that data has to be explored, and we'll come to that. But as I mentioned, the rising challenge of legacy data harbors significant risk. Data has been hoarded. Organizations have been working on the assumption there will be data that must be retained due to a regulatory or legal requirement. So keeping everything is playing safe. Delete nothing was not the rule, but it was the response. Of course, there's always a secret notion that there is value in the data, that one day the resources and the time and the energy needed to sift through it will become available. And in truth, the technology is there now to help extract the value. It's really on the horizon for most organizations. They're starting to realize that actually we can take hold of this. But of course, then along came GDPR. You can't keep data if it contains personally identifiable information, and you don't have consent or purpose to process or store it. So there's new rules, but old data. But if you could not figure out specifically what the data was that you had to keep for legal or regulatory purposes, so it would be equally as difficult to find the data you mustn't keep. Interestingly, actually, I saw a blog on LinkedIn the other day from the ICO about information hiding in plain sight. The focus was around advice about releasing data in response to access requests. They're referring to the data that's there, just not easily visible when we look. Text with font the same color as the background, spreadsheets with hidden rows and columns, or embedded objects, files within files, attachments. This is a narrow pinpoint focus on user behavior, but an example most will be able to relate to, and it's at the core of what dark data is. With the insights of technology and the scalability of power of cloud compute, we now have a very bright light. At Automate Intelligence, we've helped many organizations get a handle on their data, and always the story is the same. There are surprises to be found. We have seen people leave the room immediately to remedy something they've seen through our technology. The most recent instance was during a proof of concept where we found what is surprisingly common, an embedded document. It was a Word document with a spreadsheet inside it. Surprisingly easy to do, surprisingly easy to miss. It contained a list of accounts, but more than that, it contained account passwords, bank details for thousands of customers. The epitome of dark data for some. Most organizations will have billions of sales worth of data in spreadsheets. The risk or the value is just unknown. We were able to find this file and flag it immediately because it contains such a high number of patterns that match bank account format. So whether it's a Word document or an email with an attachment, it is easy to miss when scanning through the file. Without deep analysis, embedded objects slip through the net. The impact of businesses ignoring this possibility is staggering. I'll show a demo at the end of the webinar if anyone stays on for it, and this will highlight the discovery ability against a publicly available data set, the Enron emails. You'd be surprised at what was released in that set. So for some, the old habits are not dying. There are significant financial risks through penalties, reputational damage of letting your customers down if there's a breach, but still the data is not being understood, valued or managed. Organizations actually tell me they've decided not to look in certain repositories of data for subject access requests, as if to say, well, we're not processing or using the data because we don't understand it, therefore it can be excluded from SAR. But obviously, that isn't the approach. So the old rules for a silo of data, a legacy system from the past, are no longer the rules to play by. And of course, you have to secure your data. Data that contains valuable IP, even if you're not conscious of the value it has. If there is a risk someone else can extract that value, it will damage your competitive edge in the market. Defining what is a valuable asset and capturing this as part of an information asset register is fundamental to driving business decisions around budgetary spend on securing that data. Because as with everything, data has its costs. It can be very cheap, but it must have relevant security around it. And it must be according to the value or risk within. I mean, cybercrime is on the increase, and it is a relentless battle. And the cost of securing data is a big concern and a drain on budget. You want to apply the best security to your valuables. Just like when you leave your car, you lock it up, you think about where the car is parked. Your Ferrari that you drive at the weekend is given a lot more consideration in this respect, more so than the Mondeo you use for work in the week. We look at our value and we protect it accordingly. And this should be the same for data. Just as at home, you lock up your house, but the wheelie bin stays outside. You don't want that cluttering up valuable space in your house. It has no value and hopefully no risk. I'm assuming people don't just throw bank statements in the bins these days. But anyway, just as importantly, if it does contain PII about customers or people you do business with, and you have a purpose and consent to capture, store, process that data, then critically you have a duty, a responsibility to protect that data for the people whose data it is. Consider yourself a custodian of that data and give it the respect it deserves. And that means to know where it is and ensure it's safe and be certain you know who has access. So by understanding the data, the reasons why you have it and how it benefits your business, you will then be in a position to accurately apply policies, manage the data through its life cycle. So Halloween has passed. Let's move on to more uplifting ideas. I've actually seen Christmas decorations on my way into work this morning. So let's try and get into a positive spirit with the next slide here. I mean, I've labored the point. Data-driven business depends on accurate, reliable data. Without complete data governance, cannot be assured, and this is such a critical point. Data governance has lagged behind the rise in new technologies, the democratization of data, the rise of data awareness, just hasn't kept pace. And this is partly why we have dark data. So holding on to data because it has value makes absolute sense. Gathering the data we do, whether deliberately or as a byproduct, has far-reaching opportunities. We hear about the fourth industrial revolution, the Internet of Things. We all know how smart our phones have become, and the fact that data is the new oil. And just as oil has to be refined, so too does data. Consider that it's estimated that cars will be generating 350 meg of data every second. That's like 240 floppy disks. Sorry, I'm showing my age now, but it illustrates the growth of data over time. To put it to work, we need to turn on the lights, and this changes everything. We've worked with one customer as part of their heavily regulated industry. They have been employing over 80 records managers to look after their regulatory responsibilities. With the use of technology that we're providing, this has now been reduced to close to 20. That is not people without jobs, that is people with new roles, providing greater value to the organization they work for. 80% of data is dark and unstructured. Think about the photos, audio, video, text, social media, satellite imagery, presentations, PDFs. It's all out there and it's continuing to grow. Before now, the opportunity to explore the value seemed infeasible, but it's getting closer for all organizations. And with the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, we're able to do so much more with this data. Recently in one POC, we passed audio files to speech-to-text services for transcription. This enabled a normal text search to be applied against audio files. Yeah, you can search for PII. You can search for value. You can do this for images. These services can find text within images and additionally provide a description of the image, again, to enable search. If you consider the applications of this in your business, in your industry, you will see where this can take us in the future. There is unfulfilled value to be mined from dark data. Give it meaning and purpose, that will transform your business. The key point to all of this is that we can use technology to learn about how we work with data, how we capture it, create it, consume it. We can clean up what we do now and plan for the future so that the data we have is not a liability, but an opportunity. As we say at AI, take control of your data so you can take control of your future. So hopefully that gives an insight into what dark data is and why it needs to be a topic of conversation within your business. At the end of the webinar, I'll be walking through a short demo to give a real taste of how you can see into the dark. But I've finished with the doom and gloom. Sorry about that. Hopefully the mood isn't too dark out there, and I'll hand over to Richard, who's going to lighten it all up as he talks about the benefits of getting people working in the cloud. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Why should cloud migration be on the agenda? In this instance, we'll be talking about migrating content to Microsoft's Office 365 service. Although there are more cloud services available from Microsoft, such as Dynamics 365, used for managing business information and processes, and Azure to create and host modern applications and services. Content is more often than not stored across multiple storage systems, which causes problems with finding documents, document duplication, and require large access and permissions overheads. Content can be stored in network file shares, NAS devices, on-premises SharePoint and other content management systems, as well as approved and unapproved cloud-based systems such as Dropbox and Google Drive. Consolidating this content into a single approved platform makes it easier for people to understand where they need to go to find content, and this is especially true for new starters and people moving roles. It also gives organizations the opportunity to analyze and rationalize their content as part of the migration process. And this is where tools such as AI Data Lift come in to try and assess what content you have and then what you're going to do with it. Many organizations have already purchased Office 365 licenses to migrate their email services. This means there is a large amount of license benefits left unused. By making use of workloads such as Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive for Business, the return on investment for licenses is much higher. Once content has been migrated to Office 365, the legacy infrastructure can be decommissioned. This saves money spent in maintaining and hosting these systems and frees up the IT department to concentrate on using technology to solve business problems. Office 365 provides a number of features that allows organizations to transform the way people work with content. Microsoft Teams allows groups of people to use a single interface for ad hoc conversations, document management, task management, conference calls, and meetings. SharePoint and OneDrive for Business contain powerful tools for creating, working with, and managing the lifecycle of content. SharePoint is the document management layer of Microsoft Teams. Office 365 classification labels enable content to be managed based on the retention and sensitivity requirements. So this feeds back into taking dark data and making it more available and then managing the lifecycle around that. The e-discovery and audit features of Office 365 make finding content across Office features easier for requirements such as GDPR data subject requests, freedom of information requests, legal cases, internal investigations, and monitoring user access and interactions with content. A single interface is used to create and manage cases and then export the content in a format that can be shared with legal resources or third parties. Power Platform is a suite of Microsoft Cloud tools that work alongside and with Office 365. These are Flow, which is now called Power Automation, Power Apps, which allows you to create applications and interfaces that then can be used to store content in SharePoint and Teams, and Power BI, which is a dashboard and reporting service. The next slide asks the question, how can we make valuable information accessible to the people that need it? Content is often difficult to find unless you know what system it's stored in, where it is stored, and in which folder, and what the file name is. How can we bring content out of the dark and make it easier for people to find and use? We can use metadata and classification labels. This allows people to create both predefined and dynamic views of content. This is much more powerful than a static folder structure, as it allows people to sort and filter content by multiple types of information. It allows people to define and control how content is labeled for sensitivity and control how it can be accessed and how it can be used. This includes making content read-only, disabling the ability to print, forward, copy, and paste content. Retention labels can be applied to ensure that content is not stored after its usefulness or compliance requirements expire. Content can be automatically deleted once it reaches a certain age. We can use Office 365 features to surface content to make it more visible to people. We can use SharePoint to publish visually attractive, accessible and responsive intranet sites to highlight and promote content. It can be used to roll up content from team, department or subject sites to a division or central homepage, and enables content owners to manage their own content, but gives internal comms teams editorial control over how content is presented to the organization. Microsoft Teams channels puts content in an easily accessible place for people to collaborate on documents in their team or department. Document management features allow people to manage their content better. Examples include versioning, which solves the multiple versions of document nightmare that people have, and this also can make search an awful lot easier. And one of the biggest problems of files being stored in network file shares is the fact there's multiple versions of the same document and nobody really knows which one's the current published version. And we can use publishing workflows, which allow teams to publish content to the organization while still working on updates in the background. Search is a single point for finding content. The search bar is available across Office 365, in Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, and the Office client applications. It crawls the content of files, which provides vastly improved search results compared to the file share-based content storage, and includes content from SharePoint, Exchange, and OneDrive for Business. Search results are intelligently sorted by relevance for each person based on the content that people around them are working on. And Delve is a personal dashboard that shows content that is being worked on by people related to the user. Think of it as an intelligent search without having to enter a search query. The next slide shows us how we can make our data more useful. Ownership can be delegated to owners of the content. This empowers content owners to manage the security and lifecycle of their content. This reduces delays to the permission changes and reduces the IT department workload. Apologies for the fire alarm. This helps provide a single source of truth by sharing content with people that need to access it, thereby helping to stop content duplication across multiple locations. Remote work enables the workforce to be more mobile and work from multiple locations, depending on the situation, such as working from home and on the road. Conditional access can be used to define who can do what, where, and on which devices. Tools such as multi-factor authentication can be used to secure access to content. And the conditional access rules can involve saying if you're in a business location, then you don't need to use multi-factor authentication, but the same person on the same device at home would need to use multi-factor authentication, thus making the platform as secure as possible while not interfering with people's everyday activities. Co-authoring helps reduce the time taken to produce and review documents by allowing multiple people to work on the document at once, and reduces people emailing documents around for review and for individual people to work on it at once. Sharing content is much easier in a cloud-based system. It allows content to be shared with people in the organization as well as people outside the organization, which can be trusted or untrusted third parties. And content owners can control access to who sees this information, and this is governed centrally by organizational policies that define what people can and can't do. This allows third parties to access the single source of truth and reduces duplication. By people accessing the same file, it means you don't have to email them around or put them on an extranet and then have the problems with the version control that we talked about above. Sensitivity labels can be used to define how people work with content. They can be tagged to a specific level. Based on that, we can define whether content can be shared externally, and then what people can do it once it's been shared externally. Reporting using Power BI enables dashboards to be created that present data in an attractive and interactive way that enables people to see trends and where issues are occurring. This can be used for both Office 365 content, and it can also be linked into Dynamics and Azure and many other services, giving a single place for reporting to be used by teams and management.
Thank you all for listening. So I suppose this is your chance now to have some engagement with us. Are there any questions? Has anybody got any questions after the information they've just listened to? If you've got any questions, you can type them in the chat box, or if you do want to unmute your mic and ask any questions, again, you're more than welcome to. Okay, well, I'll kickstart it then. Richard, I know earlier you had a client ask you a question. Are you okay to talk through that?
Yes, so a question I get asked a lot is, when analysing content as part of a migration project, how can we know what data needs to be migrated and what can be discarded? The answer to this is the best and usually only way to know what data is important and needs to be migrated is to involve the business. The main problem with this is it involves taking people away from their normal roles to make decisions around the importance of the data. This can obviously be very expensive and disruptive to the business. The way to mitigate this is to use tools such as AI Data Lift to provide insights on how data is currently being used, and therefore reducing the time required by the business to sort through their data. Obviously, we can lift and shift the content as is, but then we still end up with the same problems around compliance and retention.
Yeah, just that's a very good call there, Richard. And just to jump in on that, I mean, some organisations, I mean, we talk about legacy data and content that's reached end of life, and there is an emergency. You've got to get it off because of support's running out, etc. And a lot of people tend to kick the can down the road and leave it to the last minute. So lifting and shifting is a feasible option. But it does just carry those old behaviors behind and impedes your adoption of new technology. So it's always worthwhile taking that sort of step back. Migration's coming further down the line. It's to start governing beforehand, to start understanding, exploring that data. It's paramount. We've been doing migrations for many years now, and that's always the key point, is to spend as much time analysing as much as possible. And again, technology can do that, to enable you to reach out to the business far more easily. And put those fires out.
Thanks, guys. It looks like we have got a question on the chat. So the question is, how do you avoid a multitude of false positives returning when scanning for PII and CPD in unstructured repositories?
So that's probably one for me to pick up there. So as we're using DataLift to analyze data, the way that we do this is obviously, first of all, we use patterns. So for instance, if you're looking for postcodes, national insurance numbers, credit card numbers, etc., they're based on patterns, and we can refine patterns. So essentially we perform a search to highlight those areas of risk. As I said before, we can very quickly find documents that have got high levels of occurrences of PII in them, and then we can actually start to review that content. And it's a learning process to understand. Each organisation may have slightly different currency in the way that they create data, but using those patterns, they can be enhanced and refined, very specific for each individual use case, and it does reduce time. But again, regular expressions using patterns to find that data really is a strong way of doing it. And obviously there are other technologies out there when data is lifted to the cloud, as we do with data lift for this analysis process. There are other services out there such as entity recognition or entity relationships, and that's understanding the connections between documents of shared information about locations and names and organizations, etc. So you can start to see the relationships between that content and delve into a little bit deeper. It is a challenge. There are definitely challenges around finding false positives, but we've worked quite closely with a number of organizations and have really been able to reduce this through just refining those patterns and working with our classification system within DataLift to help report on those and get the business to look at them as well.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. Well, if anybody does think of any other questions, oh, actually, I think another one's just come up, actually. So we've got another question. What information can DataLift provide when analysing your data?
So I'll respond in brief, and obviously the demonstration that I'll follow up with shortly will kind of give a much clearer picture for you. But essentially what DataLift does is, first of all, it exposes all the metadata. That's the information around the content. That's the file name, location, the date it was created, modified, accessed, who has access to the file. That key information helps you build a good high-level overview of your data set. Then you can actually look inside the files, and this is where we detect duplication, so the exact duplicates within documents, and also then index every excuse me, and we can also index all of the text within text crackable files. And as I said earlier on, potentially you could the use case is to look at audio files as well. But once they're in the index, you can search for any of those terms and include that with the detection of patterns. All of that can be brought together to refine your data sets. So you could say, for instance, I want all HR files. They could be in multiple locations, SharePoint, file system, etc. They are, if they're policy documents, they will always be published as a PDF. So you can look for the file extension. And we only want current policy documents. So that might be based on date range. And then also inside the file, you're looking for keywords, for instance, a pattern that represents a policy number within the organization. And that is where you can apply custom patterns. So you've got all of that information that you can use to sort of bring together and refine your data set to focus on key areas. Hopefully that helps. But like I said, a quick run through the demo. It only takes a few minutes afterwards. We'll kind of give you that sight, as it were, shine the light on that for you.
That's great, thank you. If anybody does think of any other questions, please feel free to email them over. You can see the email address there, so it's marketing@rizwell.com. So I know there's a lot of information to digest, so if you do think of anything later down the line, please do feel free to drop us an email. Thank you.
Cool. So just some next steps and going through what is next. If you enjoyed this webcast, we've got an Azure migration webcast at the end of November. So we'll be sending some comms around that, and it'll definitely be on our social medias. And speaking of social media, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. The socials are at the bottom of the page. And then you can, as Michelle said, email marketing@Rizwell if you want further information or you have any questions, or if you want to book a one-to-one call with either Paul or Eamon or both. Again, we'll be following this up with an email that will have the recording on. So if you want to share that with people in your organisation, then you're free to do so. There will now be a demo led by Paul, so I'll just hand over to him.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I'm just going to share my screen now. And hopefully, if I can just get just one person out there to give me the thumbs up, you can see my screen before I get started.
I can see your screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So just a very quick overview here. I'm looking at a landing page for DataLift. We've got insights, we've got governance, and we've got GDPR showing up here. Kind of like to think of insights as being a bit like the torchlight. This is where when you first crawl your data, you switch on the torch and you start shining to those dark corners. And let's stick with that theme. And when we talk about governance, This governance is like when you actually start wiring the house up to the grid and you've got electricity coming in the house and you put your nice fancy lights up. You've actually got a better structure and order, and you can clearly see into your data on a day-to-day basis going forward. And the policy application then is where we start actioning or actually performing behavior against that data. And that's a bit like the dimmer switch. You know, you're switching the light on, you've got control over that light now, and we're kind of exercising that ability over the data. So GDPR on top of that is a workflow that we have effectively designed to just use the capability, the core product of Datalift. So if we go into insights here, what we can actually see is a very high level overview of our data set. I've crawled just over 9 million files, about 5 terabytes of data. We get a very early sight of what we consider to be useful and non-useful, and that's based on metadata, such as modified date and file extension. We can also then detect duplicates. So that is where we look at the actual contents, the streaming bytes of the file to see if there are any duplicates. So that is regardless of the file name or extension or where it's stored. Anywhere across multiple data sets, we can find those duplicates. We can then see the high level overview of the different file types, and also then the different sort of activity there when content is created, accessed and modified. So all of this gives that very, very high level picture. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on all the different parts of the display here, but what I want to do is just call out on the right hand side. We've got 2 areas, file content and file metadata. So these are the refiners. This is how we can shrink our data down. So the metadata, as I talked about a few minutes ago with that question, this is where we can start searching based on a file name or a location or last modified dates, etc. So, but what I'm going to do to show the power we can do here is I'm going to actually start searching for text within a file. So here, if I search for Visa, obviously it's related to credit cards. I've now got just over 2,000 files showing up. And within this, I can actually look then at my different files and see, oh, okay, I've got a number of files here. These are emails, got the reference has been found in. I click on that document, I can actually see it highlighted. So here you can see there's Visa, MasterCard, American Express. So they're just text terms. I'm not really concerned about those. They don't really concern me in any way, shape or form. But if we combine that with searching for a pattern, and again, this touches on that question of false positives. If I'm looking for a keyword such as Visa and a credit card number, I can bring this together to find, I've actually only got 10 files. And if I now look at these files, and just to call out quickly, this is data that was taken from the Enron files that were released back in 2001, 2002. So these were made publicly available, and we've just effectively crawled them with Datalift to see what we could find. Some very interesting things. Have to be very careful when using them for demos. So this one here, I can see I've got a mobile phone number. It's an email message, and if I click and open this, straight away you can see there's a number of occurrences of Visa in there. Now, as I'm looking at this, and this is just like flicking the torch on, I'm looking at it and thinking, hold on, that looks like structured data. There's a lot of detail in there. So what I can actually do is download that file and actually have a look at it and look at it in more detail. And when I open that up, what you will see, and here I need to just change my shared screen. Apologies, I overlooked that one. I'm just going to stop sharing a second so you can see my complete screen. So now you can actually see the email that I've downloaded, and you can see the reason why I was looking at structured data is it's an email that contains a spreadsheet, and in that spreadsheet is a list of credit card numbers. So this was what was publicly released in Enron back in 2001, 2002. So this was found very quickly, and we've done it. We found this in a number of different engagements with customers where we've been able to find this kind of data. So that's showing you the level of depth we can go into searching for keywords, etc. Just to give you an insight as well into some other elements of effectively being able to take that data to the cloud and what the art of the possible is. If I search for New Orleans in this data set, I've got quite a few files showing up in there, but I want to combine that with, I know I recently searched this file, so I'm going to change the date range and look for something within the last, it was obviously a bit longer than that, last 1 to 3 months, I've got 3 files shown up. So bear in mind I've searched the word New Orleans, and what I've got shown up here is a photo. And if I actually look in that photo, you can see New Orleans and some other information in there. Not sure what it is. And what I can actually do is open that picture up. And as I do that, I'm not sure how many of you will be familiar with this face, but this is taken from the JFK files that Microsoft used to demonstrate their cognitive services capabilities. So this is where an image has been passed through to a service that's then transcribed the text inside of that document, that image, and been out, and so we can now search for that. And this is where I was talking about searching with the audio transcript files, etc. So this is what the art of the possible is once the data has been processed and lifted to the cloud. And as I said a few minutes ago, the governance aspect is a bit like wiring the house up and putting the lights on permanently. We kind of looked in the data and we know there's a lot of risks in there. We found we've a lot of password protected documents that we need to treat. We found a lot of PST files, and again we can look inside those and find out how many of them have PII in them, so we can start actually mitigating the risk and understanding what we need to do next. And so just very quickly, if I just show you, if I do a quick search here for classification, if I look at my this particular one here, this particular classification, I've already provided with some of those refiners I was talking about a minute ago. So I'm looking in certain locations, certain phrases, etc. And what we can actually start to do now is, and this is where I start talking about actually applying actions, we can run reports, and we can generate reports outlining all the files in there, all of those that contain PII, etc. And we can share that with the business to help the business make decisions. And we can have these scheduled to run on a regular basis and share these out with the business. And then furthermore, we can actually start applying policies. And that is where we may choose to archive content, delete it from source and archive it into cold storage. So it is protecting that data, and we can have a secondary retention policy to actually delete it from the archive. Additionally, we can move that data to Office 365. And obviously, once you've got into Office 365, that is where you start to get the value of using all of that other capability that's available in that platform. So it just gives you a little bit of a taster of the capabilities you can do once you've scanned your data, once you've looked inside it, you can de-risk it, then you can start looking for the value. And obviously, like I said, there's a lot of capability with artificial intelligence and machine learning that is now available in the cloud. There's other workloads that we can pass this data off to do things with. Finally, I'll just point out from the GDPR side of things, what we like to do here is think about, the first thing is, don't just do subject access requests. You need to understand your data and de-risk first of all. So if we look here, we've got a breakdown of all those different patterns I showed earlier on. And here we have credit card number. I've got 103 documents. If I view those files and I filter it based on the ID risk count, you can see the highest one is my email that I found with the spreadsheet in it. So this gives you the ability to very, very quickly find the high risk, those areas that you need to treat. This is where typically I see a customer run out of the room and request that file gets deleted when it's discovered. But you can cleanse that, you can prepare for it, and then we can go into performing subject access requests. At this stage, I'm not going to go through the process here, but it's all about effectively performing that search for the relevant subject details, surfacing those files and enabling you to capture a decision around whether to share them or not. And the final stage then is obviously to make those available by moving them to a location where you can share them with the subject, and you can also show a report explaining the decisions and what content is available. So I have gone through that very, very quickly. More than happy to go through it in more detail and look at specific use cases. I just want to say thank you very much for giving me the time to talk today, and I hope you've got some value from that. Thank you very much, everyone.
Brilliant, thank you. So that wraps up the webcast for today. Thank you all for attending, and we'll send up a follow-up email with the recording on and with a few more pieces of information about some upcoming events. So thank you.